Well, hello, everyone. What a pleasure, what a privilege to be with you today. I'm Temple Hayes, and I am so thrilled anytime I get the opportunity to share a conversation, to heart share, to walk through the shadows of life itself. I love to be with TJ Woodward. TJ, thank you so much for being here today and expressing your energy and your wisdom and your love. It's just wonderful. We
Oh
are
my
a better
goodness.
world because you're in it. What can I tell you?
Well, I mean, I feel the same about you. I'm just so incredibly grateful. And I love these conversations we've been having every month. And honestly, there's no one I'd rather be in conversation than with you. And we just love to see what emerges. So I'm just incredibly grateful. And I love that you said through the shadow, right? Because we're good at dancing in the light, but also we're good at supporting each other through the shadow as well. So thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we both have been on, life's journey, good, bad, and indifferent. And, like we've talked about many times, it's the shadow times of my life that I really feel like I grow more into the light. People often think that I'm just going to stay in the light and I'll just get brighter and brighter. And okay, and yet there's a necessity because we get discouraged like, why am I in the shadow? Why am I in a storm? Things have been going so well. It's because things have been going so well. And so now you're going through another journey of growth. Today, TJ and I decided we're going to talk about this word that can be overused, no doubt. Oh, gratitude, gratitude. But I ask you to really stay with us, hear the conversation. Perhaps you'll hear something a different way, and let us know if you do. Write in the comments. And we also want to know what you want us to talk about because we love serving and sharing, and we want your feedback. So, I'll get us going with the thought, TJ, because this comes to me a lot. Gratitude is based upon what we already see.
Mm.
I'm so grateful for my sobriety. I'm so grateful I have a partner. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Um, Grace is what we have yet to see.
Hmm.
And so for me, one of the reasons that we intentionally practice this state of gratitude when we are in our authenticity about it, okay, then we emerge into a vibration that sets the stage for the grace that is yet to come. Does that make any sense at all?
Well, I love it. It's so interesting. I spoke at Unity of Santa Barbara a week ago Sunday, and my title was The Grace of Gratitude. So imagine that. I'm like, I could have used Temple saying it so eloquently because I love that you're talking the way you're talking about it. For me, gratitude, yes, I agree, totally overused, like yay, yay, rah, rah, gratitude. But to me, what you're pointing to is something that's much deeper, and that is to be the vibrational frequency of gratitude, regardless of circumstance, right? Because I think a lot of times gratitude is I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for that. And it's a beautiful thing. And yet there's something much deeper. And I agree wholeheartedly that, in my own journey, when I've had a greater awareness or a deepening that is required, I do get to go through the shadow. And I think it's very interesting to look at gratitude as a frequency instead of maybe a feeling or maybe a way to like work in the world or be in the world. Because in the midst of that, I can still have that frequency of gratitude. And I love that you're saying that can then usher in the grace. What a beautiful way to frame it. I always want to also be clear that what I'm not saying is let's pretend like things aren't happening that are either difficult or we see, conditions in the world. What I am saying is that in the midst of that, bringing gratitude to the situation actually will have a profound effect rather than being in the wrongness of it or the stuckness of it.
Yes. Well, when I think of gratitude, I always think of and give thanks and recognition to my boyfriend. Yes, I played both sides. And we were together 5 years and always praying in the right person that is
Mm,
the right person for you at the right time in your life. So he came into my life and he talked and spoke as if he had been sober for years. It was years later that I realized he was just a year ahead of me. But I just drank up, everything he said, being newly sober. And I said to him, what would you attribute to part of your success? I mean, he was successful being sober, he was successful with prosperity. And he said, I started many years ago writing 50 things that I love about myself.
mm,
And I have to say, at that time, coming up on 30, so not long ago, of course, but that in that, I was embarrassed to tell him that, well, I had spent my whole life being a chameleon, that I knew more about everybody else than I did myself.
mm.
And if and a lot of women, I think, adapt that, that we talk about our children, our family, or whatever. And I've seen it many times. But for me, owning my own life is that I would sit down every morning and he would just be writing away, and I would be on the third thing or the fourth thing. And I think this important to say that I push myself, TJ, and I would say I love my hair, I love my eyes. I would push myself to look for the good, okay? Until one day, yes, I did get to 50. However, it was really cool because people would come up to me and say, oh, I love your hair. And I was thinking, oh, thank you. I wrote that down this morning. I didn't say it, of course. But the point is that I pushed, what is it? Your favorite, one of your favorite people, Michael Beckwith says, you push through the pain to get to the vision,
Right.
and so that's what I want to remind everybody about is that you may feel uncomfortable, like working out. You might hurt for 6 weeks. You might gain more weight instead of lose, but that's what separates the doers from the stoppers, is that you continue to push through. So anyway, I just wanted to set that up a little bit because it changed my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because if we look at it just even through the lens of brain science, when we do the same thing over and over again, we literally create a neural pathway. Like none of us think about how we brush our teeth. And I remember being in a workshop and the instruction was this when you go home tonight, brush your teeth with the opposite hand. If you put on a sock and a sock and then a shoe and a sock and a shoe, do sock sock shoe shoe. And like those are these little tricks that we do because for me, my mind was like a Velcro to negativity. And I know why. I know why, because, I came into the world absolutely filled with joy, happiness, awe, wonder. And then over time, I just started to shrink and I started to develop those neural pathways were getting built, and those pathways were something like this. I'm never going to get through this. The world is difficult. And the world was kind of scary for me in some ways. So, coming into first recovery and then into spiritual practice and new thought, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a spiritual practice. I need to practice looking at something differently, look for the good, look for the gratitude. And that became an automatic way of being. And that changed my life. And then, of course, there was a deepening that was required. And then there was another deepening, another deepening. But the initial one was to first be aware that my mind was like a Velcro to negativity. And, I often bring this up, but I think it's important. If I'm putting poison into my mind, that's how I'm going to experience it, right? So if I'm watching the news 24/7, which is now available and it's constantly barraging me, interrupting that is an important thing. So being grateful for things is an important first step because it starts to change that neural pathway. And I start to realize, oh, my thoughts literally do create reality. Now, I know that you and I can talk about the deepening that comes later. But that was such an important beginning for me because I wasn't even aware that I had the negative thinking or the inner dialogue that was confirming that I was broken or damaged or small.
Well, you know what was kind of coming through me as you were saying that is, when back in the day, we've been around a minute or two, but back in the day, we would say a loving person lives in a loving world, a hostile person lives in a hostile world. We would give examples of the person that went, "Oh, everybody on the road today is angry." And then they go to the bank. All the cashiers at the bank are angry. Oh, my husband, my wife is so angry. What is up with all these people that are so angry? And the anger is there. Well, when we talk about creating our own reality, it doesn't divide us from these situations like algorithms.
Yeah.
Because look at life now. Because not only are we getting what we see externally when we leave the house or inside the house,
Yes.
like looking at the dog, why are you so angry? Well, because that kind of thing. But your algorithms,
Yeah.
if you are into murder, kill, everything's horrible, the world's crazy, algorithm, that's what you get on your feed. And it's fascinating because we've been teaching this for years, but now there's systems that have really been created to align with that very thing. So if you are only seeing the world as screwed up crazy, while during the week you teach the power of affirmations, you may want to look at the fact that what you're seeing is your own algorithm, it's your own alignment. And so to change that, it requires adjustment on your feet.
Yes, and I love that because I remember when I first was introduced to these concepts, I was practicing it and I started seeing these beautiful results. But I did go into a place, and I think it's important, at least seems important to me at this moment, to talk about not doing what we call metaphysical malpractice, which is like to be like, why do I keep having this negative thinking? Instead, it's like, I realize that there are endless possibilities. What word do I want to focus on? What choice do I want? What situation do I want to focus on? There are so many thoughts going through our mind, right? And a wise person once said, I'm not responsible for my first thought, but I am responsible for what I do with it. And that to me was like, oh, you mean I can just let that thought pass by? I'm thinking about, now, again, we'll go back, way back, but the I Love Lucy episode where the chocolate's going down the conveyor
Oh,
belt.
I love
Right.
that.
And I love that because, they start eating them and then they come faster and faster and faster and faster and then becomes overwhelmed. And that sense of overwhelm is how I think about the repetitive thought patterns I had. I thought I had to pick up every thought that went by. And then my mouth was just, it was really, my head was so full and my awareness. And I agree wholeheartedly about algorithm. And what's fascinating right now is science is starting to measure what mystics and certainly what New Thought has been teaching for well over 100 years, that thoughts do create reality, but there's something much deeper. And I know you and I really talk a lot about this. It's not just changing our thinking, which of course it is. Do I want to pick up that chocolate on the conveyor belt? Gloom and doom. That doesn't seem so tasty. Why do I keep tasting that one over and over and over again? Oh, you mean I can just let it go by? Wow. But when we start talking about gratitude as a frequency, we can tune into, I think about old school radios and I was mesmerized by them. You turn the dial and you get a different song. You turn the dial and you get a different song.
Mhm.
All of them exist somewhere, and I didn't understand where they were floating in the sky somewhere. That's the same thing as consciousness. I don't have to pretend like something's not there. I don't have to like be brutal with myself about my thinking. I can try a different frequency. Oh, what song gets played when I tune into the frequency of love? And what do I truly desire?
Mm. Well said, my dear. Well said. I love that. And for me, when I start entertaining the shadow thoughts,
Mhm.
um, I love how you're highlighting that because we don't go get paint and paint on top of them,
Right.
right? And so it's not. And I think this is such a grave misunderstanding of new thought or metaphysics. It's like, oh, well, that's negative, and I can't be negative, and oh, that's so wrong for me to be negative. No, 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 that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that if you continue to have the want to pick up the negative chocolate,
Yeah.
and we're going to have to use a different metaphor in our
We
next
love
session
chocolate.
because I love chocolate. I love chocolate, and so does my wife. Anyway, um, so when we are longing to continue to pick up the negative when there's a room full of people saying it and everything going well and aren't we happy, it's like, and then we bring up some kind of goo. um, where we want to work is what within me feels the need to do that.
That's right.
And I love when I listen to you give a talk or whatever. No, we're not going to continue to blame our parents the rest of our lives. We're both over 30. And
Barely,
I've been
barely.
saying that for years that we don't get to blame our parents when we're over 30. However, there is something to that. Why do I feel the need to go there instead of, and what is it? Is it the way that I've been sleeping or not in the last 48 hours? Have I changed what I'm eating? Has something else really triggered me? I do think those things are important. Otherwise, they're just repetitive unconsciously, and we're just doing them, you know? So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's so important because I think what I'm hearing you say, and I'll just put it in my own experience, for the first at least 10 years in New Thought, I was in what I now call the magical thinking phase, which is like, don't have that thought, the universe will get you. And it's like, it's so interesting because all that was reframing this idea of some punishing God, right? The cosmic two by four will get you. It's like, oh my gosh, if I entertain anything that's negative, I'm going to be smacked in the head with a board. I'm like, okay, that's maybe there's something deeper happening here. And I love where you're headed and what we're pointing to, because if I have unconscious, usually unconscious, ideas about myself of unworthiness, not good enough, I'm broken, I'm damaged, I will continue to pick up the thing on the conveyor belt that's not as delicious as chocolate. We're going to reframe that right now. Whatever that is, I'm not I'm called it's like there's no other option as long as I it's buried in the unconscious if I'm not aware of it, because I will continue to choose whatever's on the conveyor belt that is congruent with my frequency. And like I said, then I went into blaming myself. Oh, I have bad energy. Oh, I have bad. I mean, I just did a number on myself. And I realized something for me that was so that shifted me. I don't need to raise my vibration. It's about tuning into the original frequency, the ultimate frequency of who and what we are. I look at a little baby. I remember being a little kid. Joy was my state. Awe and wonder was my natural state. That frequency's still there. And for me, it was just buried under all of the BS belief systems and all the experiences I had had. And so if I see myself continuing to grab that not chocolate on the conveyor belt, I want to be curious about that rather than judging myself and say, where did I start believing that that's what I deserved? And what would it be like and what would it feel like for me to realize that underneath all of this, I mean, that's the foundational truth in New Thought, that there's a place within us that is God essence, source energy, light, whatever word we use, our Buddha nature, that that's there and that's unharmed and unharmable. And it's not about creating that, it's about remembering that, tuning back into that frequency. It's not magic. The universe isn't going to get me, but if I continue to have pick up those that not chocolate on the conveyor belt, I'll experience it. It becomes so simple.
Yeah, it is simple. And it's likened to what I've said many times in my life. There's a law that's always working.
Yeah.
Even for the people that say it doesn't work, it works for them by not working. And so what you are articulating so clearly is that you're working with a law, and it is working, and it's a natural law. And um, I love new thought, and I love, someone, I was interviewing someone the other day and they were saying, but I don't understand why we call it new because it's not new. It will make you new. The teaching is ancient, but I do like now, I appreciate that the word new is in front because what is wanting to unfold within me that is different, that isn't the same way that I've always done it, that isn't habitual because I've just got it down and it's not really a science, it's just a habit, kind or unkind. And it's exciting when you think about the new emerging in you through the way that you use your thoughts and to get excited about your life. And to me, I love hanging out in forums or places where you are because I feel like that we both love life.
Yeah.
We didn't say that we love every moment about everything we have endured as a public person, but the essence of life, I just get so excited. And I've always said, if you're excited about your life is excited about you.
And life is exciting.
And it's
Right.
exciting.
And I also, when you and I first met all those years ago, the place where I felt deeply connected with you is ushering in a depth into new thought. Because, a wise person once said, if you want to practice new thought, have one, right?
Yeah.
Like, have a new thought. And I was like, oh, have a new thought. And also, there's something deeper that we're pointing to, and that is that something that wants to emerge, there's a depth there. And that is when we begin to take a look at all the layers, like Rumi said, we're not here to seek for love, but to look at the berries we put on top of it. And to me, that is the new thought. Yes, it's in a way changing our thinking because it's change your thinking, change your life. Which what do I want to pick up off the conveyor belt? And then there's this deeper awareness that like, wow, there is a place within me that is infinite, and to understand that and to look at like the sky's not the limit, it's the limits, or the limits that I've put there through my own fear and my own playing small. And it's funny, I was just editing videos earlier, and I it's just synchronistic because in the video it says, my friend Temple Hayes says, if once you're 30 you can't blame your parents. And of course it didn't get Temple Hayes right, so I had to send it back to the editor. I don't know what it called you, but it was quite it's quite synchronistic that you brought that up, because I did spend time first blaming my parents, then blaming the world, then blaming religion, then blaming the government, but ultimately then I went to blaming myself.
Yeah.
And that became a really dark place. And I would not change it for anything, because I realized how much harm I caused myself and ultimately the world by blaming myself. And there was a place where I went into the darkness, if we even call it that. I went into the fertile ground. If you put a seed out in the sunshine, nothing grows, it gets burnt. You have to put it in the fertile soil, and it has to have time in that darkness, and then it has to be watered. Everything has to be just right. And that's just a metaphor for consciousness. There are times to go within and to celebrate the darkness and to say, what is here for me, what is wanting to transform, and what is wanting to emerge. And then that seed of a new life sprouts. It's way beyond thought, but thought is often a first step. At least it was for me.
And, when you go through major changes, also, you revisit things. I know, as you know about me, it's the first sabbatical. I used to laugh with my colleague Kevin Ross about, you're on sabbatical? Oh yeah, I take one. And I went, and I wasn't making him wrong, and I certainly wasn't making me right, but I went, I've never been on a sabbatical. And by this time, between being an intern and a student of New Thought plus ministry, it's like we got some big numbers happening. And I went, I've never taken a sabbatical. And he was like, well, but you're supposed to. And don't you think it would be good if you did? And I said, well, I kind of think if I ever did, I don't know that I would ever go back. And And I've been on one, as you know, for quite some time. And I watch for a couple of things, not obsessively, but with intention. I watch, what am I wanting to fill in the gap?
Yeah.
What am I wanting to put there? And I also feel this emerging of revisiting things that were uncomfortable as a public person, or
Mm.
gossip as a public person, or things spoken that I didn't even know what people were talking about, with my name being the reference. And I don't stuff that and go, well, I'm on sabbatical and all is good and everything's perfect. And, that was a while ago. I revisit it, as a sacred friend, like, what are you telling me?
Mm.
What is my takeaway from this? Isn't it interesting? And as you said, it comes back to, with hindsight, the necessity to forgive, to delve in, and to release. And
Wow.
it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
It
Yes.
truly is a beautiful thing. I remember there was one point when I was realizing that a transformation was happening, and I understood at a different level, maybe a deeper level, that I had a choice to either lean into the transformation or avoid the transformation. And there was this 72-hour period where I closed my curtains, I turned off my phone, and I stayed with myself. And it lasted for 72 hours. And it ended with me in the fetal position, just sobbing. And it felt like lifetimes were just being like exfoliated off. And I came to an awareness within that was so beyond words. It's difficult for me to even put it into words, but I was so angry about something. And here I was in ministerial school and oh so spiritual, but this thing was there. And I had a deeper awareness that, like, and this to me is the essence of gratitude. I'm not like, oh, I'm so grateful. Everything's love and light. I'm going to say I'm not angry and move on. I'm like, no, there is something there that is a recurring theme that I'm either going to lean into with gratitude, doesn't mean it feels good, with gratitude to see what that transformation is. And somewhere in the midst of it, I realized that I have a choice and that most of my life was choosing unconsciously,
Hmm.
and that I could bring this into conscious awareness so that I could understand that I have these thoughts, but I'm not these thoughts. I have what we might call the ego. I thought the goal was to get rid of the ego. I was one of those people. I wouldn't have probably said that, but I did really want to be free from the what I call the human experience. And something happened there, and I woke up and said, no, we're not spiritual beings having a human experience. We're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience.
Right.
That all of this is part of the process. And sometimes the feel good feels good, but sometimes the depth of pain is also fertilizer for a new life.
Mm. Hallelujah. Well, um, having been around a minute and just as an observer, there's so much trendiness
Yeah.
taught and new thought, the newest and biggest and boldest and brightest glitter, that that person has the answer, and one of those was, you're not supposed to have an ego. I
Mm.
don't know who came up with that or thought, ooh, like authenticity, woo, everybody wants to hear about that, ooh. I remember on the radio show one time, it was like seven people, an agent booked everything for me, but it was authenticity. And I called them and I said, I need something different. Okay. I mean, I don't want to talk another week about authenticity. And that being said, when you think about and you look at nature, and nature is another name for God, just more letters, it's like, do you see a peacock, covering up, the male peacock covering up, going, I'm not supposed to really express and fully live out, or just look at nature, or the dolphin that's flipping. Oh, I better turn that down a little low because I have too much dolphin ego. It's ridiculous. And to me, it's the it's the humility of being full of spirit, not yourself. And of course, we have had the pleasure of meeting people in our lives that we don't want to model it to that extreme, but it's crucial to have esteem and a sense of confidence and to know who we are, at least who we are today, with the moving forward with the gratitude and the grace to, allow something different for tomorrow. And that's kind of been the theme of what, for those of you that are listening, that we've been talking about the entire time is gratitude is really the deeper definition of gratitude is to recognize and own your wholeness, even if you feel the parts are catching up with you, the elements of you, the pieces of you. But the gratitude is your opportunity to fully express that something thought enough of you to create you. Raymond Charles Barker would say that. He was a religious scientist. If the creator thought enough of you to create you, for goodness sakes, think enough to allow yourself to be created.
Oh
You know,
my gosh. And what I love about that too is then we realize, or I realized in my own journey, that the ego actually could serve spirit. In other words, I could use the gifts I was given. I remember, and I talk about this somewhat frequently, but my first mentor, Mary Helen, was the most incredibly enlightened person, but she would no more do what we're doing right here. Like, let's just say she wasn't born a Leo, okay?
right, right.
The
Bless
peacock.
it.
She wasn't, but she had this beautiful gift of working one-on-one with people like no one I've ever met. And she transformed so many lives. But when she was close to her transition, she said to me, you're very extroverted and you're going to take this message to a much bigger audience. And I want to say thank you. And it was like she handed me the torch, but also gave me permission to be me. Like, yeah, I remember one time I saw a talk that I gave and I'm like, wow, I am just so effervescent. And I had all this judgment. And then I'm like, oh, but it's it's the gift I was given. And
Mhm.
I use this metaphor because I think it makes sense to me. Like, can you imagine asking Mother Teresa to be Tony Robbins and get on that stage and boom, 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 right? Like just two different expressions, but powerful message that has been delivered in the world in their own unique way. So the ego, in my experience, when the ego is in charge, I've gotten myself into some very interesting and somewhat painful situations when I say, oh, this is something I get to use. I get to use these gifts. That's why in the life visioning process, the question is, what are my unique skills and talents that will help fulfill the vision? And I can be grateful for that. It's not who I am, but it's a tool that I have.
Right.
And we all have our own way of expressing. And what a beautiful world that we all have. We don't want to all be peacocks. We also don't want to all be blue jays. We could talk a long time about that. But
Right,
it's
right.
the
Yeah.
whole the differences that make it so beautiful.
Yes, yes. And I love when I like the inspiration of Britain's Got Talent or
Yeah.
America's Got Talent. And I love it when somebody comes on and they're 14. I was watching this girl last night, and she was saying, I have waited my whole life to be here, and she's 14, but she's been
Yeah,
working
yeah.
towards this dream, since she was 4 or 5 years
Right.
old. And when we look at people in the public, I know I can speak for myself and people, in general, and as far as the public, they make a lot of assumptions like, oh, I know you couldn't wait for this, and you couldn't wait for the light to be on you, and you couldn't wait to have a microphone and speak at a large crowd, and you couldn't wait. And I go, bless you, but you don't know anything about me. I
Yeah.
never wanted to do this. I didn't. I
Mm.
avoided it. I was in ministerial school and I would ask them, TJ, not to call on me. I was terrified. I didn't want to do public speaking. I didn't want to
Wow.
be the spokesperson for anything. And yet, it wouldn't let me go. It was like it kept the invitation kept coming. So when we see people that we feel are exemplifying something and we separate ourselves from them saying, well, I wouldn't be able to do that, don't forget that that 14-year-old that's been waiting since she was 4 didn't start last week, right? Or the public person like myself that used to go, please don't call on me. I don't want to talk. Um, I'm not comfortable doing that. It doesn't mean it was always easy. It
Right.
doesn't mean that at all. Yeah.
Wow. And gratitude is such a big part of that because when I lean in and I'm grateful for our all parts, you mentioned that earlier, like the different parts of myself. I really was so fragmented. Like there was a part I wanted to show the world, which by the way needed to look perfect at all times. And then there was a part that I wanted to keep hidden. The part I perceived was broken or not good enough. And so like I was so fragmented. Gratitude really helped me bring all that together because I remember when I first started thinking about the depth of gratitude, that it's not just grateful for, but it could be grateful in the midst of anything, and then ultimately being the frequency of gratitude, a big that like bridging from that grateful for into the grateful in was to be grateful for all of my parts.
Oh, yes.
And those of us who have heard things in our life like talks too much,
Yeah.
too much energy.
Too
But
loud.
in my case, too feminine.
Yeah.
Don't talk like a girl, don't look like a girl,
Too,
don't walk
somebody
like a
would
girl.
say you're too feminine.
When I was a kid, I was definitely I
I, I
that
couldn't.
was the first those were the first messages that I heard that
Mm.
I let in and let me feel small. And it's so interesting because I remember thinking, what's wrong with being like a girl? Like, it's just so interesting looking back at like, those messages. Stand that way, don't look that way. And it wasn't just from other kids, it was from adults. So we've transformed in such an amazing way. And the reason I want to point that out is not because, oh, look how great we are that we've done this, but because
No.
these principles, these practices, and new thought, ageless wisdom.
Well, hi, I'm back. And TJ is back. Thank you for your patience. Life happens sometimes while you're making other plans. And we are just so delighted you've been here. We've been talking about the power of gratitude, gratitude being what we see and recognize in the energy of, as TJ continues to say, we're changing our vibration so that new grace is the who we are now. Gratitude to me tends to be who we were then, which is great. But the moving forward with grace, it's who we are becoming. I love that. And I love what Joan Bornacinco says. We are somewhere between the no longer and the not yet. And I used to feel, I didn't know it at the time, but on this sabbatical, I've learned that in the beginning of my sabbaticalness, it's like, oh, what have I got going on? Oh, somebody's gonna call. What are you up to? Oh, let's see. I'm oming, I'm drumming, what am I doing? It felt uncomfortable. But now it's like it's so exciting because I know so many new things are coming. I don't know what they are, but I know they're coming and I feel it. I don't need to know. And that is the beauty of grace is you don't need to know. You just need to know within your knowing that amazing things are coming into your being.
That is so true because so often I would catch a vision and then my mind would immediately interpret exactly how I thought it was going to look. And then lo and behold, it not only did it rarely, if ever, look that way, but it was usually much way better or bigger than I could have imagined. And I was reminded of that this past weekend in such a powerful way. Like my plan would have been so much smaller than what has emerged. So I love what you're saying. It's like being in the frequency of that and being in the knowing of that. And then in my language, I would say then just letting go of how I think it's supposed to look and just be surprised every step of the way. I
Every
love
step
that.
of the way. Well, you have been a wonderful surprise to me for, I don't know, 12, 14 years. We were trying to figure it out not long ago in New Orleans. It just feels like we've always been from the same shoe department, walking the same kind of path. I love and appreciate you. And everyone tuning in, if you are moved by this, as you're moved, please forward it to your friends and share it for the holiday season, for this time of life, that for us to focus on what we want more of is a good thing.
It
And
sure is.
again, reach out to us. Let us know what you would love us to talk about, the subjects you're interested in, because we value you and we value our time together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Peace and blessings, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy thanks. Thanks before the giving.